What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the college football welcome back betting preview part 2. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, just as I did in part 1, Colin Wilson, Brett McMurphy, and Mike Calabrese. If you didn't listen to part 1 already, make sure you checked it out. High level, just quick overview. If you've been sleeping under a rock since Georgia crushed TCU, we'll continue that today, not 20, 30 minutes, get into a little bit more specifics, but we won't go too deep because we have conference preview episodes coming for each conference over the next few weeks leading up to week 0. I mentioned Georgia dismantling TCU. Georgia's going for a three-peat. That has not happened in the AP era. It has not happened since 1936 when, believe it or not, Minnesota won 3 straight national titles. My question, high level, Collins, we're going to get into futures over the next month or so. First of all, Georgia, we won't. Can Georgia three-peat? We might not truly know until the College Football Playoff because of their schedule. They do have questions leading up into the season. A lot of defensive attrition, just like last year. New offensive coordinator, new tackles, new quarterback. They got wide receivers coming in for the transfer portal who should help. There's a lot of questions, but then you look at their schedule, and are they going to be answered before we get to the College Football Playoff? So, Colin, 2-part question. Will we know that much if Georgia, can three-peat until the College Football Playoff? And if not Georgia, who? Do you have one team you want to throw out there for if not Georgia, who?
If there is a crack in the armor, it's going to come on the offense. Mike Bobo taking over for Todd Monken, in my opinion. I know Bobo knows the system. I know he's been connected to the hip to Kirby in lots of spots. He's been connected to Georgia a lot, went to Colorado State, came back. I get it, but this is not the guy that I think is calling an offense for a national championship team. That being said, it's probably the best defense in college football. But, Monken taking his position with your beloved Ravens he might dominate that vertical too. So if there is going to be a problem with Georgia football, it's going to come on the offensive side. Watch their formations, watch their penalties, see if the players grasp what Bobo wants to do. And we'll be here, Stuckey, you and I will be here to tell everybody if this is Monken's offensive system or if Bobo's changed it up and it's going to be bad. If there's a team out there that I love more than anybody, it's the first team I wrote about when I left SoFi at the national title game. It's LSU. I was highly skeptical bringing in 15,000 snaps of experience through the transfer portal last year. They ended up going to the SEC championship game. They covered 8 games, sadly not against Tennessee, a big week that I was on them. And I got, they had some special teams errors, but it really came together at the end of the season. And those 15,000 snaps of experience that led to FBS made them a powerful force, along with recruiting of players like Harold Perkins. So now what you have is an LSU team that didn't need to dip in the transfer portal as much because of how talented they are. They are too deep, loaded everywhere. And now we're starting to see a lot of questions about Alabama. I have questions about Texas A&M. I see LSU as a prime national title contender. I see them surviving Florida State. I agree with what the spread is, but they are too deep everywhere. If they get hurt at quarterback, they have 2 quarterbacks that literally could win the Heisman. Who else has that? So that's the team that I am higher on. I don't care what you think their stock is. It should be higher.
We're going to probably disagree on that, but on our SEC preview episode, we'll probably have Brody Miller on, who always drinks the LSU Kool-Aid, so we can do maybe 2 versus 1 on that. But yeah, I agree on the questions with Alabama. And just because it worked with Georgia last year doesn't mean it's going to work this year. New quarterback, new tackles, new offensive coordinator. And then there is still some defensive attrition. They're obviously going to be elite with who they bring in. But they could have a lot of cracks and still make it through the regular season undefeated, but just because of how easy the schedule is. Mike, any thoughts on if not Georgia, who?
Well, just real quick, I never thought I'd have to be stumping for Alabama, but 3 of their last 4 recruiting classes, I believe, were top 10 of all time. And when you look at their, defensive front, it's a clown car of 5-star kids. I think if Kevin Steele can put together defensively from a, schematic standpoint, all the pieces are there for their defense to take a big step forward. Offensively, what I find to be interesting is that everyone's now totally panicking at quarterback as though they have no options whatsoever. Spring football, I try not to get overly enamored with it because coaches have so much impact on the format of the spring game. That's the time that we're seeing them, the play calling. Obviously the players can't be touched at quarterback. So Milrow, that huge impact on the ground isn't seen as much as it would be in an actual live game with live bullets flying around. Just in general, I think this Alabama team, like I'm talking myself into them more and more as we get closer to the season. And I don't know. I think it's just strange vis-a-vis the Georgia fan base, which I put this out here on Twitter and I was like, where is your comfort level with Bobo? Because I mean, I'm of the age that I remember they wanted to ride him out of town on a rail years ago. And obviously his ceiling is very high, but he's had huge struggles even at Georgia as the offense coordinator in the past. Colorado State didn't go so great. So I don't know. I kind of view the SEC as more wide open potentially than most. LSU, I agree with you, Colin, in terms of having two quarterbacks that could win the Heisman Trophy. That's absolutely true. And I'll pose this question to you. Is there any chance that becomes a looking over your shoulder situation, a locker room plus or a locker room minus, whether they go with Nussmeier or Daniels? Like in your minds, who do you think they should go with? And is it a potential issue if they have a quarterback controversy?
Nussmeier can win the national title. Nussmeier can sit in the crowded pocket and he can thread a pass 60 yards down the field. Daniels has got to run the inside zone. He's just not bulky. And unless he's hit the weight room and is deadlifting 600 pounds, and I haven't seen him I'll see him probably at SEC Media Days, hopefully, if he's there. But Daniels doesn't have the body to be taking hits and running inside zone for a 12-game season, then the SEC championship. So Nussmeier can win them the national title. Now, the beauty is
Brian Kelly could also lose to Georgia State, though.
Brian Kelly knows how to
work
these quarterbacks. Brian Kelly knows how to work these quarterbacks. And that's where I questioned like Dave Aranda last year coming out early and telling Bohannon, like, you're not going to be the starter. And, Bohannon's off and Shapen's your only quarterback. Well, now he's in the same position with Blake Shapen, but he's got Sawyer Robertson behind him. Do you hold your cards close to your vest so that you keep both quarterbacks? And I know Brett wants to pop in here. I was told something by Dana Holgerson that I did not realize. If you are a graduate transfer, you can still leave before August 1st. So even though we think that the college football landscape is like solid right now, we know what it's going to look like. What happens if Spencer Sanders doesn't win the job down at Ole Miss? I mean, it's crazy right now.
Yep. Yeah, still some changes to come. You mentioned briefly in the SEC, you mentioned briefly Texas A&M. The big news there's a lot of coordinator changes. There are 24 new head coaches, I think, across FBS, even more coordinator changes. Obviously, one of the biggest coordinator changes was Colin's favorite guy, Bobby Petrino. Some of you might remember Colin putting on the Bobby Petrino neck brace last year after losing an Arkansas-Missouri State bet. But Bobby Petrino is now down at Texas A&M. I personally think this reminds me just like Narduzzi and Whipple. I was like, this is not. Now that worked a little bit better than I thought for a year, but ultimately was not a marriage long term. I think Fisher has even a bigger ego, and this is just headed for another vehicle accident. I don't know if that's the right term to use here, but Brett, can this marriage work? Because a lot of what's held Texas A&M has other questions, but a lot of what's held Texas A&M back has been, just extremely predictable, conservative, Jimbo Fisher, non-evolved offense. In theory, you bring in a coordinator, can have a massive impact if you actually give them the reins. Any thoughts here on the potential of this marriage and whether or not you think it's going to work?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's either it's going to work and they're going to, with Petrino, they're going to average 45 points a game, or it's not going to work, and it will be.
Brett's analysis is it's going to work, or it's not going to work.
No,
Brett coming in ready for the fire off the hot takes on July 14th, mid-season form.
Or the dumpster fire will resemble the bonfires they have the night before. I mean, I've got some information on what may be going on, but I'm not at liberty to say. I just think that, look, Jimbo Fisher made history last year, and not in a good way. He became the first coach in the history of college football to have a top 10 preseason ranked team that finished the year unranked for the third time in his career. Now they've got basically everyone back. They've got everyone back returning. Is that good news or bad news? We talk about all these great offenses. Last year, A&M scored over 28 points against FBS opponents exactly one more time than we did. That is not good. And I think you've seen some stuff publicly where Jimbo's kind of going back on Petrino was going to have full control. And now there's some question whether Petrino is going to have full control. And if Petrino doesn't have full control and you see Jimbo on the sideline with his Sunday New York Times thick play sheet scrolling through with his glasses on his nose, then I think A&M's in big trouble.
Listen, let me just pop in here. That Jimbo is set to hit the stage at SEC Media Days on Monday the 17th. He's the last one to hit the stage. If you're interested in this, turn on SEC Network, because I am the first one with my hand up, and I'm going to follow him off to the breakout room, and all we're going to talk about is who's calling plays on offense. And I'm going to get into his pro style, and I'm going to get into Petrino and what he does with hitches and motion. I'm going to get into it, and I'm going to ask very specific questions. And if I see, like a poker player at the World Series of Poker, if I see twitches or scratches or rashes breaking out on Jimbo's face, it's not smooth sailing going on down there at all. So be watching.
Yeah, I personally, I'm going to come with that. I don't think it's going to work. We'll see. Colin's on rash watch duty. So when we have the SEC preview, we'll see if he spotted any blemishes on Petrino's face. On one side of the argument, if you want to argue that it works, that it's going to work, 5 of their 7 losses were by 6 points or fewer last year. But on the other hand, they were preseason number 6 and never even got to 6 wins. They finished with a 5-7 record. Calabrese, any hot takes here on Texas A&M? Or if you want to transition it to a fellow in-state team in Texas that will be in the SEC eventually, but not this year. And you're going to hear a lot. So you're going to hear a lot of hot takes about Texas A&M. And also, of course, the "Is Texas back" narrative. Any thoughts on either?
Well, quickly, I'm just surprised that A&M doesn't get more heat in the offseason. Like Iowa naturally gets all the offensive. Your offense is broken. Your women's basketball superstar scored more points than you did all fall. Like stuff like that gets thrown around a lot, and I think rightfully so. But yeah, A&M's offense was so dysfunctional from a play calling standpoint. They weren't able to utilize their best pieces. But it's just not that far removed from them looking amazing with Kellen Mond, who I think we can all agree is not some transcendent generational talent at quarterback. So yes, this is like one of those, science fair disasters. Potentially, this is one of those make it home volcanoes that could absolutely blow up in front of the teacher. So I'm going to be watching it just from a pure entertainment standpoint. And then when you look at Texas, I've been throwing it out on social media as well. I don't know why Sark isn't on the hot seat, at least from a perception standpoint, because in my opinion, his roster almost works against him. He has arguably the highest rated quarterback room in the history of college football. And he had Bijan Robinson, who was a generational talent at running back last year. And they went through those swoons in Big 12 play where they look totally dysfunctional on offense. And that is supposed to be his calling card, a la Jimbo Fisher. Like, you're supposed to be the offensive savant. So in my opinion, I think, when you also add in the fact that his buyout is so modest compared to modern buyouts, Sark's buyout, I think starting January 1st is now 7 figures. So if he doesn't win 8 games minimum this year, I see him out on the 40 acres. And I think that should be as big a storyline as Jimbo's, forced marriage with Petrino at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the game that is a microcosm of the Jimbo Fisher offensive era in College Station was the App State game. They got a 95-yard kick return for a touchdown at home against a team that just gave up 60 the week before in week 1. They held App State to 17 points and they lost. So yeah, in regards to Texas, I actually think. Now, look, it's going to come down. Is Texas back? I still don't know my declaration on this, because all I want to find out, and I got to talk to people, and it's going to, because where Sark has done a tremendous job, is this roster is now like a top tier SEC roster as far as the depth, the line, which Texas hasn't had in years past. but where you can only go as far as your quarterback is going to take you. And I'm not sure Arch Manning is ready to lead Texas to a national title. Maybe he is, but this comes down to Quinn Ewers living up to his potential. And one of the things we saw last year is, and I've heard some things that maybe the work ethic on some of the things that he thinks he knows it all already. Maybe he doesn't work on his footwork enough. You see that in the deep passing, right? TCU said, hey, try to throw it deep on us. The deep passing wasn't there. If the deep passing accuracy and efficiency isn't there, well, guess what? Texas gets, if they get to the college football playoff, which they certainly can, they're the deserved favorites in the Big 12. Their ceiling is severely limited. So it's going to come down to, did like bringing in Arch motivate Ewers to take that next step, put in the time in the offseason, improve that deep passing? Because Texas has now a well-rounded enough roster to get to the college football playoff and make noise if one of, I would assume Ewers, probably Arch is maybe a year away, but it could be, if that quarterback can reach their ceiling, because the talent is certainly in the room.
Let's not forget about Malik Murphy either, which I'm so confused as to why at this point he doesn't have an exit strategy, because he came in also one of the top rated quarterbacks that the school's ever brought to Austin. So maybe there's something that we don't know. Maybe he's actually in the mix at this point, or maybe it's a transfer early in the season, or at least a declaration that he's going to do so. But I agree. I think Texas has to hit the ground running. If they lose to Bama in Tuscaloosa, it still has to be a B+ A- offensive performance. If they look like those November Texas teams from last year, no more buying green bananas for Sark. I think it's going to be curtains for him.
Colin, is Texas back? I know you want to jump in on this Sark slander, potential Sark slander here.
Will not take any Sark slander. Texas is winning the Big 12 this year. That was the very first conference future I put down back in the first week of May. Had no problem throwing a lot of money on that. And, I think you should play it up to -120, but I don't think that's
Colin actually found +600 on Indian Reservation in Montana.
Yeah, well, I live around a lot of them. So I don't think the story is so much. And this, yes, Texas is good. They are loaded everywhere. They are in a class by themselves in this current jumbo Big 12 conference. But you can go read about it in the Big 12 preview that got published this morning on Action Network. I am not a fan of Oklahoma. If we're going to talk about teams that are overvalued, or you just look at their jersey and you think they're as good as they are because of what they were in the past, that's Oklahoma. There are no answers on this defense. I understand they went out to the portal and they got a player to fill in on the line. They got a player to fill in at linebacker, and they got a player in the secondary. You still don't have, for a Venables defense, you still don't have the James Skowski middle linebacker who lines up the defensive interior, tells his linebackers where to go, and on the fly can steal signals because Venables is calling them in. And I know that Venables wants to talk about Danny Stutzman, and I know that he's really excited about his defense, but his coverage last year, when he was at Clemson, it was like 20% cover 3, 20% quarters. Last year, he went to like 48% quarters coverage. Why? Because they can't tackle. They have no tackling fundamentals. They can't play coverage. They can't do anything except get 20 yards off the ball and hope there isn't an explosive play. You just can't convince me that this defense, which got annihilated by TCU, annihilated by Texas, that they've all of a sudden made the jump to be within a touchdown of Texas? No, absolutely not. So do I think Texas is winning the Big 12? Absolutely. And the reason why you should bang it and keep playing it through -120 is because who's the second team? Who's knocking them down to third in this conference? There's no way they don't make it to Arlington, because Oklahoma is not that team.
Yeah. I mean, I have depth questions about Oklahoma too. After some of the portal losses, they did 4 of their 7 losses were by a field goal last year, and another one by 7. So they were close in some games, but I agree the defense still isn't up to snuff. I will say in the Big 12, if you're looking for early takes on teams that I think are undervalued in the win totals market, I'm trusting the 2 staffs that I really believe in ultimately, especially from a defense perspective when it comes to Iowa State. Iowa State, I think pretty. I mean, look, this is a team that you used to count on to win close games, right? They're going to muck it up. They're going to like what's their schedule? They host Texas. If Texas is like undefeated or just one loss and needs to win out, and Texas goes to Ames late in the year, I think the second to last week, that game's gonna be close. I mean, Iowa State always plays Texas tough, but Iowa State is 0-10 in their last 10 games decided by 7 points or less. This is a team that has not turnover margin last year. They're red zone. They're 1-6 in one possession games. This is like kind of like last year they lost a lot of talent. Look, they lost Purdy. They lost a ton of talent.
All their tight ends. All their tight ends.
We saw how good Breece Hall looked at the Jets before he got hurt. This is kind of like the year after, expectations a little lower. I like I think Iowa State's in a good spot just to have their win totals. Like, hey, can they get the bowl eligibility? Yes, I think they will find a way. And then I'm still going to trust the Kansas staff. I love the staff. I love their offensive ingenuity. I don't think either of those two teams, to your point, Con, are threats to Texas, which is why I also will be on Texas to win the Big 12. But just wanted to throw out those two teams out. We'll get much more in depth once we get to the Big 12 preview. Mike, before we get to maybe some more Group of Five talk, Brett, I'll let you hop in there. Do you have any thoughts on is Texas back, or do you want to share an update on your Pokes and a lot of changes in the offseason in the state of Oklahoma State? Do you have any takes on either of those schools?
Yeah, I don't know. Texas has to prove it to me. They've been the favorite every year. They haven't done it. As far as Oklahoma State, Gundy, Colin and I talked to him for a little bit off to the side. He wants to run the ball more. He wants to control the clock. He wants to be more of a running attack. It's, easy to say he wants to do it. Can he actually do it? I guess Bowman's going to be the guy quarterback. Who knows? We'll find out. The Pokes, I think they can keep their bowl streak going. I think that's a successful season. I think it's a down year for Oklahoma State. Real quickly, one kind of long shot, although I'm hearing a lot of people really like this team now, which I don't like. I'd rather be out on an island on this. And I actually predicted them to win the Big 12 back in February whenever I did my bowl projections, but that's Texas Tech. I just love the offense they have there. And, everyone has a very good offense in the Big 12. Can they make a couple of stops? Joey McGuire thinks the defense will be better than last year, even though they had some key losses on the defensive front. But I kind of like Texas Tech. They remind me of TCU last year. Not flying as much under the radar anymore. But, again, like Colin said, after Texas, who is there, I think Texas Tech could get to the title game, and then you've got a good chance to hedge out on the Red Raiders, who I think are, double-digit odds to win the conference, 10, 12, 14-1.
Yeah, manageable road league slate. They avoid Oklahoma. They host Kansas State and TCU. Obviously, they do go to Texas in the finale, which might end up deciding it. Maybe it's both teams are still alive. I will say with Texas Tech, the good thing about maybe playing a future on them is, yes, their defense could be better. The secondary in particular, I really like. And if you want to take a longer shot, what are they? Probably 12-1-ish to win the Big 12. In these big games, they're going to go for a lot of fourth downs when they might be an underdog and just increase the variance of some of these games. They're going to go for it a ton, which is a thing you like if a team is more of a long shot compared to Texas, which is closer to even money.
That's not changing. So I asked Joey McGuire that. I asked Joey McGuire, and he's like, no, we have a standing meeting with a consulting company every Thursday morning that goes over our fourth down situations and everybody else in the nation to see and grades us how well we did. And essentially McGuire said going for it on fourth down is our identity. So that's not changing.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's going to be a lot of fourth down variance. They do need to replace a good kicker, which he was important last year, but yeah, we will see. I'm looking forward to the Big 12 preview. Mike, I'm sure you're probably sick of hearing about the Power 5 teams now.
I actually have a future on Texas Tech, so I like that was the bookends of that conversation. If Tyler Shuck's healthy all throughout the fall, I think they have a puncher's chance to get to the Big 12 title game. I love what they have on offense, mainly because of Zach Kitley, the OC, who came from, the G5 ranks. He goes from Houston Baptist to Western Kentucky. And I think if he's dealing with a full deck the entire season, this potentially could be a top 10 offense. So that's enough to get it done in the Big 12, at least to be in the mix late November.
Rusty
and-
Spats coming in at center for a Kitley's old center. That is a transfer portal move that is not talked about enough.
Yeah. They also get their right guard back, which allows their left guard back from injury, which allows their right guard to slide back to his natural position with Stats coming in at center. The O-line should be better. I am worried about the front. Their defensive, front six-ish. They lose two really important linebackers. They're moving one outside in. And so, they got to have that kid from Q's hit, but we'll get into that when we get to the Big 12 preview. Group of 5, Mike, how about just people that watch a lot of Power 5 or interested in individual players? Name a couple potential impact transfers that you're interested in watching or just want to note at the Group of 5 level heading into this year.
So last year around this time, everyone was talking about Clay Helton going to Georgia Southern. It was kind of like tongue in cheek, like this is kind of him being put out to pasture. It was surprising that he got the job the way it ended at USC. And then he
one of the best jobs in the nation last year, by the way.
Absolutely.
His win total under just got destroyed over and over again leading up to the season. And I didn't think the offense could hit like it did. So kudos to Helton and the job he did there last year. We will see if he can do it again with another. Van Treese is out. If he can do it with another transfer quarterback, but go ahead.
Van Treese is gone. Davis Brin in from Tulsa. I think that has an opportunity to keep the good times rolling there in Statesboro. Malik Hornsby or TJ Finley to Texas State. I'm not saying that this team is going to improve much on their 4 wins from last year, but they could be an against the spread darling and an over darling. They cracked, I believe, just the top 80 defensively last year. I think they could take a minor baby step backwards. So you could see some very high scoring games. Tom Herman back in the G5 coaching at FAU. He takes Casey Thompson from Nebraska in the portal. And then one that's absolutely under the radar, in my opinion, going G5 to G5, Louisiana Monroe going to North Texas. That's Chandler Rogers. He was a quarterback that, at least in my opinion, accomplished a good deal without much of a supporting cast. And at UNT this year with Eric Morris in year 1, I think he could pop offensively right away. So those are just some names to keep an eye on as the season rolls on.
And by the way, I should mention one of the bigger changes that have implications on futures, in particular conference futures, that this is the year where we'll see the most amount of conferences without divisions, right? Like take the Mountain West, where it's just, hey, let's the ACC, let's just the 2 best teams. You don't have to worry about, okay, who won their division. So that's something to note as well. You'll see that covered more in depth in all of our conference previews as well. Do you have a one Group of 5 team that you want to throw out? Obviously, like I mentioned, various other times, we're going to have previews for every conference. Do you have one team that you think is either going to be overvalued or undervalued? And it can either be from a preseason futures perspective or just over the first few weeks.
So I'll stick with 2 conference champions here. I'll start with Toledo. I think that they're a little bit overvalued. Jason Candle, I think, gets a lot of love, but he inherited a program that was in really good shape from Matt Campbell. And yes, they broke through and won last year. But I think Daquan Finn is viewed as this electric dual threat quarterback who can put up big numbers. If you remove his game against Kent State, where he had, I believe, 6 passing touchdowns last year, the rest of his stats for the season, 17 TDs, 12 picks. They lose 3 really big talents in their front 7. So I think Toledo's going to take a baby step backwards, where at this point it seems like a preseason coronation that they're just going to defend their MAC title, and that's going to be easy for them. I don't view it that way. And then from an undervalued perspective, another conference champion at this point, going from Conference USA up to the AAC, UTSA, a lot of the preseason metrics, I don't think view them properly. Bill Conley's SP plus numbers have them 60th in the country, 36th in offense. I think that's ridiculous, given the fact that they have Frank Harris back at quarterback. They have a lot of good receivers, even losing Takari Franklin in the portal to Ole Miss. They still, with that being said, have 8 all AAC first teamers in the preseason. They have a great secondary. Rashad Wisdom is back as well. And obviously, you have to squint looking at any G5 team to make any noise to crash the top 10 by season's end. But they get Houston on the road to start the season, and then they go to Neyland, I want to say week 3 or week 4. Obviously, if they win those 2 games and go undefeated or have 1 loss, they're going to be in the conversation to be a top 10 team. If they run the table, they could be, in that Cincinnati, where do we put them situation, UCF kind of thing. I think UTSA is undervalued. Love their coaching staff. I understand that they lose their OC to Oregon, but offensively, this team was an absolute monster last year. So I'm on the Roadrunners. Meet. Still think they're underrated.
Yeah, and by the way, Toledo, yeah, Candle is awful. I mean, yes, he finally won the MAC title last year. He good recruiter, right? Toledo always has the most talented team in the MAC, and he just always comes up short in big games. Yes, they finally won the MAC title. Number one, they should have lost to Eastern Michigan, which would have changed everything. They got a lucky tipped pick, but they got to play Ohio in the championship without the offensive player of the year and the best quarterback, and they would have lost that game. Yes, I'm still bitter about my future, but that was a pretty big deal for Ohio to play without the Maple. What is his nickname now? I'm forgetting.
The Maple Missile, Curtis Rourke.
Missile. Who
coming to an over at San Diego State real soon.
All right. Well, Colin gets his San Diego State over in at the buzzer. We got a media day and Rash Watch mention in, so cash those tickets. The one ticket that did not cash, which everyone would have had if they could bet on this podcast, Colin, on both preview episodes, 0 mention of Arkansas football. Take that for what it's worth. Maybe he's low on Arkansas. We'll see on the SEC preview. Let's wrap it up there. Time for us to go get back to work, dig into these teams, and get ready for the conference-specific previews. We will go through every team of our favorite win totals, futures. College football is coming. We're under 50 days. They'll be here before we know it. It was good to get the gang back together. Cannot wait to sweat on Saturdays with all of you, and then weekdays of the MAC. Just great to be back. Hope you enjoyed these 2 high-level welcome back episodes. Get ready because the conference previews are coming. Thanks again for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. Leave a review, 5-star review. If you've already left one, just grab someone's phone, your girls, your friends, because we will do giveaways, give away a ton of shit, especially as the season approaches. And those really help us, especially since we've been off for quite some time. But thanks again to Colin Wilson, Brett McMurphy, Mike Calabrese, our producer, Matt Mitchell on the back end. Thanks to our audio and video team, as always. And thanks, of course, to all of you once again for tuning in. Time for us to go back to work. We'll catch you all over the next few weeks with all of our conference preview episodes. Cheers.